in fact, what movings and meetings influenced you. If you take a piece of paper and you try to identify for yourself, not when did I get that diploma, when did I join that company, but more where did I live, which countries, etc. Which people did I meet which influenced me? Were there certain meetings or events which influenced me? Because now if you have some business experience, of course it's already a bit different, because when you apply for a job, etc., people look at that background. Specifically people who just come from university finishing a degree. In fact, all CVs roughly look the same. It's a similar type of degrees, similar type of schools, with similar type of levels. So to distinguish yourself from others, it helps a lot to include certain elements in your CV, or at least reflect on them, so that when you have an interview, you can bring certain things to the forefront which otherwise you wouldn't have done. I know I've done this in another program for a lot of people who just finished their studies, and one person described where he had stayed, meetings he had, and there was nothing special. Apart from one thing he sort of slightly mentioned with sort of, well, I don't want to emphasize it too much. In my student time, I also was a DJ. And in the whole story, I said, the only thing which interests me is, could you tell a bit more about the work you did as a DJ? And he said, well, I did it every 2 weeks. And I said, how many people attended that? It was some 500, 600, etc. I said, that's the point you can sell. Because apparently you're able to attract an audience and to get them to become a loyal audience. So you're able to interact with that audience and feel what they want. And that's something you can sell. Normally, in an interview, he would never have brought that up. He would even have sort of disguised that as a sort of, something you do as a student, but you don't want to mention. So what I would like you to do is really go through the steps in your life, countries you lived, people you met who might have influenced you, events you attended which had an influence. Try to reflect a bit on that, and then we'll take on a voluntary basis a few of you to describe that to us and see what are things out of that which might, for an employer, be very interesting. And there is a second point we're going to look at later, namely the networking element, because that's also one of the reasons why employers want you. Yeah, so take 5-10 minutes for that. It's important also to see what you got out of those interaction with cultures, because for you it's probably normal because it's your life, but it's probably putting you in a very small percentage of people who have that international experience. And I mean, in this classroom there might be more, because this is a sort of pre-selection of people who want to do things internationally. But that's often something you feel normal, and if you were able to adapt to all those cultures and you didn't have too much difficulties in interacting in other cultures, you developed gradually a skill of working internationally. I always compared that I did some time ago work for the ILO, the International Labour Organization, the United Nations organization located in Geneva. And that's the sort of organization which groups trade unions and negotiates on trade conditions and labor conditions, etc. And because they were afraid that they might need to also get some external funding, not from the United Nations, but from clients, they asked me to identify with them what might be their core competencies they could sell externally. And we did a brainstorming on that, and each time we came to a competence, we said, yeah, but you know, they know something about pension systems, etc. Yeah, but there's Mercer Consulting who specialized in that. We know something about salary scales. Yeah, but there's Hay Consulting who specialized in that. So each time they found, said, no, that's not really something which is unique. till when I heard them describe what they did, I said, but you're always working in multicultural teams. All your projects are multicultural teams. They said, yeah, of course, we're never in a team where the two people of the same nationality. Of course. I said, yeah, but do you realize that is very exceptional, and a lot of companies would like to have that competence to work cross-culturally, apparently in an easy way. And what I noticed, I said, in fact, what you have developed as a competence, you didn't even realize. And that's something which happens often. Let's say, if I always compare it with getting a driver's license. If you're far too young to get a driver's license, nobody in your environment might talk about cars, but toy cars, but not really cars where you say, I need a driver's license. So you're unconsciously incompetent. No problem, because you're not even aware of it. If we talk about internationalization, we're talking about a group here of very internationally people with possibly having worked in different countries, but it's a few percent of the population. The biggest part of the population don't have international experience, don't see the problem that they can't interact with other cultures, or the culture has to come to them, and then they might find some problems, but they're unconsciously incompetent. When you get to the age, depends a bit on the country, of 15, 16, 17, you say, well, everybody starts talking about driving a car, I need a driver's license, so then you become consciously incompetent. You realize, I need a driver's license. You take driver's lessons, finally you pass your driver's exam. The first day you step in a car with your new driver's license, I can assure you, you're very consciously competent. Because it's not a routine yet. So you think, oh yeah, indeed, that's the way I have to conduct that car. If you've been driving for a long time, you get to a stage where you're unconsciously, you see it coming, competent. You rent a car, you drive off, you never drove that model before, but and that's the same, I noticed, with ILO on working internationally. And it could well be that with all your movements and the way you interacted with other cultures, you suddenly have developed a competence you're not even aware of, because for you it comes natural, and for others it's rather exceptional that you have it. So it's important to try to identify if you have certain competencies which have come automatically during your life, due to meetings, due to movements, due to certain events, which you could more or less commercialize if you go on the labor market. The other thing is, of course, at such a young age, being thrown in a situation where you have to manage yourself being fully independent, might well be that that also facilitates, but that's a guess, to work in foreign countries. Because you're so used to organize your life without interference of others that it's easier to move your life from one location to the other as well. So that might also be one of the reasons why because it's also something in your CV of short periods of 3-4 years, not these very long periods. That's, by the way, in CVs, of course, something you have to keep in mind when you apply for a job. What type of organization are you applying to? I mentioned it before on creativity. If you have a corporate culture, which is rather bureaucratic, risk-adverse, a CV which shows frequent change is not seen as the first preference. Now, there are sometimes ways in which you can bring your CV in such a way that it looks as if it's, let's say if you worked for a big company, but in 3 different functions, emphasizing I worked for a long time for the same company, works in such a bureaucratic, risk-averse environment. If you would apply to a very entrepreneurial, very dynamic, not risk-averse company, they might say, 9 years with the same company, not very dynamic. So then you write your CV differently and say, yeah, it's the same company, but 3 very different functions could have been in different companies, and that makes you suddenly look more dynamic. So the way in which you group it depends very much on what you apply for. I saw you make a drawing of your life, or wasn't it related to the question? I don't know. Yeah, it was related. Explain the drawing to us, if you're willing to. You probably have to keep it up so that people can say what see what you're talking about. Yeah, that's the risk if you make something. So I already derived from that you're somebody who, if we talk about communication, has a visual intention. You want to see things and you symbolize it instead of writing it up. And yeah, tell us, what are all these signs standing for?
The symbolic of the signs are mainly national maps.
Yeah.
There are several countries' national maps. I wrote them together and marked some of the years, like regarding to the movement.
Yeah.
And then symbols of music, art, medical care, also wishes in different languages. Well, it is not different language, but different expressions. Then also...
And have those wishes changed over time? Is there a timeline in the wishes?
Not really. I just simply juxtapose them all together on the page.
Yeah.
So mainly were China, France, and I try to draw a map of Brazil and Africa, but not really successful for that.
Yeah.
And,
but those are all regions where you lived or worked?
Yes, related.
Yeah.
Related. Yes. And also marked some of the names, some of the moments that I thought important, but it's not yet accomplished. So. Yeah.
No, but that's something to work on, to see what's behind that. You say a juxtaposition of countries. Does that mean that you say they're very different environments, where you have to behave very differently, where I got very different things, or are there similarities, are there some overlaps? You don't draw it overlapping. That might say something. And I don't want to go sort of psychological tour, but I mean that those elements, it's important to reflect on that because often when we look at CVs, we go for the sort of standard things. As I described, the diplomas, I worked for that employer in that function from then to then. And of course you need that as well, but and that's probably the first selection an employer will make, and when they interview 10 people, they'll look at certain things which make the person special. And that's probably in your drawings, if you think further on it. And it could be in your ideals, for instance. If you have certain dreams, the dreams are probably the things which are the driving force behind you. One of the ways of finding out, by the way, what is a core competence, what really makes you tick, is think back of something you liked in your work where you lost any sense of time. You were so enthusiastic about what you were doing that you lost any sense of time, because that's the nearest thing to your best qualities. And it's only a limited number of times in your life that you experience it, but if you experience it, it's much more powerful than any other accumulation of knowledge you have. So reflect on that and try to derive from that moment where I lost any sense of time. I was enjoying myself in my work. That could be your core competence. Yeah.